Inside the Illini Big Ten College Football is brought to you by your local Anheuser-Busch distributors, O'Brien Auto Park of Urbana, Hickory River Smokehouse in Urbana, and WAND.
Welcome to Inside the Illini Big Ten Football, Week 9 of the college season. Game 7 for the Fighting Illini as they get ready for homecoming against Michigan State. Hi, welcome to Hickory River Smokehouse in Urbana. I'm Matt Loveless, sports director with WAND, and host of Inside the Illini. We, of course, cover all the big topics across college football, the Big Ten, and take a look at this week's Fighting Illini matchup. And as usual, I'm joined by our panel of experts. Matt Daniels rejoining us at the desk after a bye week. Lauren was here, so it's been a while for you.
It's been about 2 weeks or so. So hopefully I can fill in and keep up the good vibes that Lauren brings to the show every week he's on.
You're doing good in the picks segment as a team.
Okay.
We'll get to that a little bit later. And Steve Kelly, also Sports Talk 1400. Steve, how you feeling?
I'm good. How are you?
Very well, very well. And not so well on the football field if we're talking Fighting Illini football. A lot of the same problems reared their ugly head. Initial thoughts on what you saw last week?
Just the defense is really bad right now. I mean, that's just being blunt and honest. And Tim Beckman, kind of addressed it too this week. He addressed the problems that they're having on defense, mainly on the defensive line, and in the secondary, missed tackles, which we first kind of saw spring up against Washington more than a month ago, have really been a crux for Illinois in Big Ten play at Nebraska, at Wisconsin, and it might continue today against Michigan State.
The defensive coordinator in any situation is going to take the heat when the defense is not going very well.
Right.
But you don't see Tim Banks missing any tackles or missing an assignment, so it's not all his fault. I get it. I get how the progression goes. I'm not sure what he does. I don't know that he's got people to replace people with. He doesn't have enough depth on that side of the football, and that's going to be a problem all year long.
And the numbers I took a look at to start with, in their 2 Big Ten games so far, Illinois has been outscored 35-0 in the first quarter, 27-7 in the third quarter. So coming out of the locker room on either side of it, they haven't been able to get things going. Well, the big story across college football last Sunday was the release of the BCS rankings. So we saw the first ones come out, and I guess from Big Ten country, we see Ohio State there at number 4. Any chance? They need some people to lose in front of them, don't they?
They need some people to lose in front of them. They need to play better, too. They haven't really been putting teams away. I mean, Northwestern almost beat them 3 weeks ago. Iowa had them on the ropes as well. Braxton Miller is, erratic at times, much like their entire team right now. Mind you, they're still undefeated, which a lot of teams in the country at this moment would love that fact. Yeah. But they're not, I wouldn't say they're up in the echelon of, Alabama or Florida State right now.
There are 2 big problems where they let Iowa hang around too long in that game, and Florida State, the way they played going into Clemson.
Right. Quickly, any national championship predictions? Who are the 2 that are going to
I've said all along it's going to be Alabama and Oregon. I think that's still going to be the case, although Florida State has, become the Florida State that we used to expect in the 1990s. And it's good to see the Seminoles back in the mix, but I'd still say Oregon and Alabama are the 2 teams.
I'm living with this year, waiting for next year, when we decided on the field, right?
There you go. Hey, that's a smart man right there. Hey, well, it wasn't what people around here had hoped last week, but it was probably what many expected. The rushing attack was too tough to stop from Wisconsin. We look back at the game against the Badgers next on Inside the Illini Big Ten Football. Welcome back to Inside the Illini. Time now we get into last week's game on the show. Wisconsin came to town with one of the top rushing attacks in the country. In terms of efficiency, 7.1 yards per carry was the best in the country. A tough task for the Illini as we look back at the game with Wisconsin.
Illini quarterback Nate Scheelhaus knew a fast start against the number 25 Badgers would be key.
We just didn't capitalize when we got on their side of the 50, and you've got to do that against a great team. We've got to start a lot faster than we did.
Oh, it was a fast start, all right, but by the visiting team. James White started the scoring on Wisconsin's first possession, pushing a defender for the last yard or 2. 7-0 Wisconsin. After an Illinois punt, here they were again, and you leave some space for the nation's second leading rusher. Forget about it. Melvin Gordon in from 26 yards. Then the problems mounted for Illinois. A fumble on their own 8-yard line gave the Badgers an easy opportunity, and cashing in here. Joel Stavy out to Brian Wozniak. Touchdown Wisconsin. 10 minutes hadn't even gone by, and it was 21-0 Badgers. Many figured the defense would struggle, but frustration was on the offensive side of the ball. The Illini had negative 11 yards of total offense after 4 possessions. Yes, they went backwards 11 yards on 12 plays. In the second, the Illini finally got going, and this was the spark. A 51-yard strike to Steve Hull, a career day for the receiver turned safety turned receiver again. Josh Ferguson would finish off the touchdown drive, and Illinois would pull within 11 at the half.
I think we definitely felt like it was a ball game. Definitely felt like we can move the ball. It's just the ability to stay consistent with that and to especially do that early.
But it's happening so often, it's almost cliche. The third quarter woes continued for Illinois, blanked on offense and run over on defense. White getting in on the passing game, taking in the second of 3 total touchdowns on the day. And 3 was the magic number for Gordon, too, rushing his third score in to open a 42-17 Badger lead heading into the fourth. The teams traded a pair of touchdowns in the final period, but trading was not what the Illini needed as they fell 56-32.
I thought the wideouts made some plays. That was good to see. They played, threw the ball pretty well, but it's just that pressure early that just seemed to get to us a little.
Wisconsin did its thing on the ground, 289 yards rushing, and save for a couple of Illini highlights, including Aaron Bailey's first career passing touchdown. That Big Ten losing streak reached 16 games.
We're 3-3 at the halfway point. We've got 6 Big Ten games left. And we know that right now it's like going in at half, 0-0.
Well, like you said there, it took less than 10 minutes for Wisconsin to score their first 3 touchdowns. It kind of felt like it was over by then. You just told me you were working on some stuff. A lot of us are just getting settled in the first quarter. The Illini were playing from behind from the get-go.
Oh, yeah. I mean, with our tight deadline last Saturday night and the evening kickoff, the first quarter was kind of a blur for me up in the press box, but Wisconsin definitely took it to Illinois fast and furiously in the opening 10 minutes or so. And that, like you mentioned earlier, that's been the big downfall for Illinois in Big Ten play. Getting behind 14-0 at Nebraska was huge, and Saturday night when you get down 21-0 to a team like Wisconsin, that will not bode well for a defense that has struggled as much as Illinois has this year.
Doesn't help to defend when they get the ball at your 8-yard line either.
That's true, and I'm not sure I get this. You gave the stats, falling behind by 3 scores early. They do it consistently. They do it in the second half. It's not like baseball where there's 160 games. You're going to 162 games. You're going to be flat some nights. These guys play once a week, 12 a season. Mm-hmm. Would seem to me that you'd be ready to play when the game starts.
We'll talk about the Badgers running game there. They had 298 yards coming in. They had 289, so it was fairly average. Consider some of the early season opponents Wisconsin played to pad those stats a little bit. Wisconsin probably played a little bit of an above-average game.
Well, Melvin Gordon's going to play in the NFL someday. I think that's pretty clear. And James White is a proven running back, too. Their elusiveness and their ability to shed tackles was evident against Illinois. You look at Wisconsin's rushing game coming into that game, their third-string tailback, Corey Clement, a true freshman who scored late in the game against Illinois, had more rushing yards than Josh Ferguson, who was Illinois' leading rusher, had coming into the game. They love running the ball up at Wisconsin. I know Gary Anderson was in his first year there, but he really hasn't changed the approach that Brett Bielema and Barry Alvarez worked to perfection during their tenure there.
When you said you didn't see much of those first 3 scores, I thought maybe you were just hiding your eyes.
No, I was typing furiously away in the press box.
Well, you knew things weren't going to be great when the strength of that Wisconsin team is their offensive line and the weakness of the Illini is the defensive line.
Yeah, we talked about that a lot going into it. And quietly, Jared Aberderis, the receiver, 106 yards on 8 catches. The receiving game was working fairly well as well. Stabby didn't have big numbers, but
Stabby didn't have big numbers, but he had productive numbers. He was able to move the ball at times, and he really didn't need to beat Illinois in the passing game because they got up on him so early, so they could kind of scale back and showcase that passing display later on in the season.
I think Wisconsin's rushing numbers were supposed to be that good. I don't think Illinois were supposed to be this bad. What happened in the running game for Illinois, Steve?
Well, I don't know. It never got started, did
right.
it? Donovan Young, we're still waiting on him. Josh Ferguson's been effective both running the ball and catching it, more so catching it and getting him into the open field. I don't know what to say about Donovan Young. They need him to step up. Now we're halfway through the season. You wonder, will that happen?
Well, they're not handing him the ball as much anymore, but I think what Cubit said after the game, that maybe was more of a symptom of how the game had already gone. They
Yeah,
were
when you're
playing from
behind by 3
You got to
scores.
throw it around a little.
Well, and it was key too. I mean, the first play Illinois had in that game was kind of a screen pass to Josh Ferguson in the flat, and he gained about 20 yards or so, but it came back on a illegal block by Ted Karras, Illinois' right guard, and I'm not going to, sit here and nitpick and say, oh, what might have happened, but that was kind of a key play in that game as Illinois was in Wisconsin territory after that, or close to midfield, I want to say, because I wasn't watching much of the first half. I did see that play, but Donovan Young needs to get going, and Josh Ferguson has had some breakout games, but the running game was not a factor at all against Wisconsin.
And a team that's been fairly healthy for the most part this year. The injury report list has been fairly small. Got a little banged up on Saturday.
Yeah, Steve Hull took a hit to the head late in the third quarter. Ryan Langford limped off, but he seemed to be okay afterwards. Miles Osei suffered a concussion in the first half, didn't play in the second half at all. And the big injury was Vangelo Bentley in the kick return game. Is also starting cornerback for Illinois. Suffered a left ankle injury, I want to say left leg injury, not real sure about that, but he was in a boot for most of the Wisconsin game. He was in a boot earlier this week at practice, so who knows if he'll be able to go 100% if he does go today at all against the Spartans.
Well, that'll be a situation we'll monitor. We'll talk about Steve Hull a little bit later and see if we can get hopefully these guys can get a little bit more healthy. Well, up next we dig deeper into the Big Ten, starting with the leaders division, where it still looks like a race to come in second to Ohio State. We'll look at the highlights next on Inside the Illini, Big Ten football.
The Inside the Illini Weekly MVP recognizes the top playmaker from the last Fighting Illini game. It was the best day in the offensive career for Illinois receiver Steve Hull. Hull converted back to his high school position after 3 years at safety, had 6 catches for 106 yards, including this one. A 51-yard strike that finally set the offensive pieces in motion. Hull now has 281 yards receiving, good for third on the team. Steve Hull, our weekly MVP.
Welcome back to Hickory River Smokehouse in Urbana for Inside the Illini Big Ten football, the time of the show where we delve into some of the Big Ten topics. We'll start with a look at the highlights from Week 8 with our own Eric Harold.
Thank you, Matt. Number 4, Ohio State taking on Iowa. And Iowa would lead this thing early on, but Braxton Miller says he's going to change that, throws to Philly Brown, catches it at the 20, takes it the rest of the way into the end zone, touchdown Buckeyes. They tie it up at 10. Later, it would be tied at 24, but Carlos Hyde takes a handoff, runs right, finds a hole, almost goes down, keeps his balance, and dives into the end zone. Ohio State takes the lead 31-24, and they would win this thing 34-24 over the Hawkeyes. The Hoosiers taking on Michigan. Michigan would set many records on offense. This was a track meet of a game, but Michigan falters here. They make a mistake. They fumble. Indiana brings it back inside the 10. That would set up a very short scoring drive, finished off by Tevin Coleman. Up the middle and in. Hoosiers pull within a score. They would be down 11 again here, but Trey Roberson throws to the right side. Shane Wynn with the touchdown brings Indiana back within a score. There were 76 points scored at this point in the third quarter. Trey Roberson says, why not more? Kofi Hughes catches it, runs with it into the end zone. Indiana down only 2, but Michigan would pull away late as they defeat the Hoosiers 63-47. Purdue taking on Michigan State. Danny Etling sets up, blown up in the backfield, did not see it coming. Michigan State recovers the fumble, takes it in for the touchdown, 7-0 Michigan State. Purdue would try to answer as Etling in the shotgun looks downfield, again taken down. Futility on offense for Purdue. They do not score, and Michigan State wins 14-0 over the Boilermakers. Not in action this week, the Nittany Lions of Penn State. Their next game is a showdown later tonight against the Ohio State Buckeyes.
We saw there Ohio State with the narrow victory, their 19th straight win. That's a pretty good little streak they got there, but they want to get somewhere with it. You talked to Matt about these non-dominating victories, tied in the fourth quarter against Iowa. I guess that's the third year in a row that's happened against them. Is it a matchup problem for the Buckeyes, or what's going on there?
I just think they're not playing up to the potential. They got, I'd say they arguably have the best athletes and the best talent in the Big Ten. It's just, for whatever reason, the offense isn't clicking, the defense isn't clicking. I know they lost Bradley Roby early in that game for a targeting hit on Iowa tight end C.J. Fedorowicz, so that might have had an effect on their defense. But their Buckeyes are showing they're susceptible to opposing offenses, what Northwestern did and Iowa did, a team that's not really known for its offense. Probably doesn't have Urban Meyer sleeping very well this week in Columbus at all.
Well, Iowa certainly saw something because they were, you mentioned the tight end. They were using their tight end a lot in that ball game, getting a lot of catches there, and they saw something during the week that showed them that might be effective. Ohio State woke up in time, as they've been doing lately. They play Penn State today. They should handle them. That's in Columbus. But as we talked at the beginning of the show, they need something to happen if they're going to move into the title game.
Penn State sat out this week. They've been a hot and cold team so far. What do you make of them, Steve?
That's another one that's hard for me to put a finger on. I really haven't seen them a lot. We'll see them coming up next week, obviously, when Illinois goes out to Happy Valley. They've been hot and cold, up and down. They had a loss that you wouldn't have thought they had. Then they come back and they win the game against Michigan. Maybe the better question is, what's going on with Michigan?
Yeah, it's hard to figure. What do you think? What do you figure, Penn State?
I think they might surprise some people tonight. Christian Hackenberg's a true freshman quarterback, but he was a 5-star recruit coming in there, and Bill O'Brien's had been able to mold quarterbacks how he wants them to be. Everyone saw what he did last year with Matt McGloin, and I wouldn't be surprised if Penn State kind of gets up on him early, and again, Ohio State goes into the fourth quarter, and it might be a tie game, or they might be facing a deficit. I don't think Penn State has anything to lose going into the Horseshoe tonight, and I'd expect Hackenberg to just throw the ball around, not as much as Washington State did last week.
Yeah, but, 89 passes. How about that?
I don't think the Nittany Lions will do that against Ohio State.
One team I think will be rooting pretty hard for Penn State is Wisconsin. They need some help for a chance to get to the Big Ten title game. They get a bye this week, then they're at Iowa. Not a ton of excitement on their schedule left. They just need help.
Yeah, I think Wisconsin showed in their win against Northwestern before they beat Illinois last week that Chris Borland talked about it leading up to Illinois. He thinks the Badgers might be the best team in the Big Ten still. Now it might just be his own confidence and his team and stuff, but I think they'd love to have another shot at Ohio State. Obviously they won't get that because they already lost to them, but I think the Badgers, if Ohio State stumbles, Wisconsin will be right there to kind of take that opportunity and run with it.
I was very impressed with Wisconsin. They were able to stop Illinois without Chris Borland being a factor. He went out early in that ball game. I think they're good. I don't think they're better than Ohio State, given the fact that Ohio State already beat them. But they will need some help to get to the title game. I just don't think they do. They'll be in a nice bowl game again.
Purdue 0-3 in the league. The loss to Michigan State was a 14-0 loss. Not an offensive lover's dream, but
yeah, it was a cold and rainy day in East Lansing, and Purdue's struggling. That's pretty evident. I think right now, if you look at Illinois' schedule, that's the game Illinois fans think that the Illini can pull off a win there.
Well, we'll take a look at a lot of cross-divisional matchups again. Next up, we'll take a look at the Legends, and if Northwestern hadn't kicked itself out of the conference title game race already, might have just booted themselves out the door last week. We'll take a look at those highlights next on Inside the Illini, Big Ten Football.
The Inside the Illini Play of the Week is sponsored by your local Anheuser-Busch distributor, Ron Chetty Distributing. It was the longest play of the game for Illinois, 51 yards deep to Steve Hull.
He really did a great job calling that, and my job was easy. I just had to put my hands up.
Why couldn't they have this earlier in the game? It sparked an Illini offense that had to play from behind on a career day for Hull.
Welcome back to the show. We're getting into the Legends division now. Upset Saturday did bite one Big Ten team, one with some bowl aspirations, big bowl aspirations. We'll go to Eric Harold again for the highlights from Week 8.
Thank you, Matt. Legends Division. Michigan State still unbeaten in the Big Ten. Purdue looking to change that. Danny Etling blown up in the backfield. Michigan State recovers. Danico Sallin takes it in for the touchdown. Michigan State up 7-0. Fourth quarter, still 7-0. Connor Cook pitches to Tony Lippett. Lippett throws to Andrew Gleicher. Touchdown, Michigan State, 14-0 over Purdue. That would be the final as the Spartans remain unbeaten. Iowa trying to take down number 4 Ohio State. They would lead this thing early thanks to Jake Rudock. Throwing to C.J. Fedorowicz, touchdown, Iowa takes a 7-0 lead. Later, tied at 10, Rudock passes to Cavante Martin-Manley again. Iowa takes a lead 17-10, but they would not be able to take down Ohio State. Ohio State wins 34-24. Michigan hosting Indiana. This game was an offensive showcase. These two were a big part of it as Devin Gardner throws to Jeremy Gowan. 21-yard touchdown, Michigan up 28-14. Later, same connection. Devin Gardner looks downfield, airs it out to Jeremy Gowan, 51 yards. Gowan had 369 yards, a Big Ten record. Gardner had 584 yards of total offense, and Michigan wins 63-47. Minnesota on the road playing Northwestern. Philip Nelson fakes a handoff, looks downfield, throws it to Derek Engel. Touchdown. Touchdown Golden Gophers. They tie it up at 7. Later, Northwestern trying to take the lead, trying to answer. Simeon picked off. James Manuel steps in front of the slant and takes it the rest of the way. Minnesota takes the lead 14-7. They win over the Wildcats 20-17. Not playing this past week, number 24, Nebraska.
The guys will just go down the list in order of standing, starting with Michigan State 3-0 in the division, in the Big Ten now. Holding off Purdue, that defense sure looks pretty darn good, though.
The defense is the top in the country in terms of total defense. They're allowing about 228 yards a game. They also have 5 defensive touchdowns. Their defensive end, Shalik Calhoun, has 3 of those, also leading the Spartans in 4 sacks. Defense is getting it done. In East Lansing, I know Tom Izzo would be happy with what Mark D'Antonio's squad is doing so far this year.
I'll tell you who I like in that division later tonight. We've all 3 seen Nebraska. We know what they've got. We've not seen Michigan State. We'll see them today. I'd like to see Michigan State in person and get a better view on that. Michigan, I'm not sure about that team yet, but Michigan State's defense, certainly on paper, is impressive, and we'll see how that goes today.
You mentioned the 228 yards. I think second is like 269 yards. I think there's about 40 yards difference between first and second. That's how much better Michigan State is.
Or about 200 and maybe 50 yards less than what Illinois is giving up per game.
And they're only giving up 60 yards, under 60 yards per game rushing.
Yes, it's been incredible. I looked at the passing numbers and I saw they're 4th in passing. They're number 1 in rushing yards allowed. So they've been pretty incredible. Now you mentioned Michigan. We'll talk about Michigan. A record-breaking day for Devin Gardner in a shootout game that they had with Indiana.
Yeah, it seemed almost like it was midwinter, and that was a basketball score you might see. I don't know with the offenses that John Beilein and Tom Crean have nowadays, but maybe 20 years ago when Bob Knight and Steve Fisher were going at it. But yeah, Indiana can score points. Apparently Michigan can too. Devin Gardner had a breakout game after some struggles at times this year, and he's kind of asserted himself back as being the guy in Ann Arbor right now.
And that game went back and forth for a long time, and Michigan pulled away late. What did they put up, 62?
63
in a non-overtime game. That's getting up and down the field.
Big 12, or that's the Oregon numbers right there. Nebraska had the week off, but they travel to Minnesota. Gophers kind of flying high still after a big win over a team. I said we'd go in order of the standings, which is why we haven't got to Northwestern yet. Big win over Northwestern.
Yeah, I mean the Gophers will be flying even higher if they can knock off the Cornhuskers.
Right.
I don't think that's going to happen necessarily, but yeah, Tracy Claeys has done a decent job rallying Minnesota, and Jerry Kill made the trip down to Evanston last week. He's supposed to be in attendance for today's game against Nebraska as well, and Minnesota's only 1 win away from being bowl eligible.
Yeah, the Gophers are 5-2 on the season. Is this the week that Taylor Martinez plays for Nebraska? We'll have to wait and see.
I want to make sure we get to Northwestern here. Followed the losses to Ohio State and Wisconsin. We called the Wisconsin loss maybe the letdown game. What do we call this game, this loss to Minnesota?
Just a bad game, I guess. Pat Fitzgerald needs to find some answers quick, or Northwestern might not even go to a bowl game.
That was the meltdown after the letdown.
There you go. That's why we have Steve here. He comes up with catchy nicknames like that.
And the last thing we'll talk about, Iowa Hawkeyes. Give them credit. They played a good half against Ohio State.
I think Iowa's surprising a lot of people this year. I mean, they lost to Michigan State, but they took care of business against Minnesota, and they were competitive against Ohio State. I think folks in Iowa City are feeling a little bit better about Kirk Ferentz and the job he's doing this year with them.
They have the same record as Northwestern overall, 4-3. Both those teams with needing 2 more wins to be bowl eligible. They both might get there.
You look at all the records: 6-1, 5-1, 6-1, 4-3, 5-2, 4-3.
That was fast. That was good. a lot of numbers there.
I can say numbers quickly. Well, next up, we'll take a look at the Inside the Illini Spotlight, a move that's finally starting to pay dividends as long as he stays healthy. Steve Hull in at receiver, catching passes for the first time in the Big Ten. We look at him a little bit deeper after a big week at Wisconsin. That's next on Inside the Illini, Big Ten football. welcome back to Inside the Illini Big Ten Football, the portion of the show where we get to learn a little bit more about the players that make this team tick. One kind of feels like a whole new player on this team, despite the fact that he's a fourth-year player in his senior year. Last year we talked about Steve Hull, the safety, talked about his interceptions. Now we're talking about his receptions. Our Noah Newman takes a look at Steve Hull in our Inside the Illini Spotlight.
Steve Hull's grappled with injuries throughout his career. Last year, a banged-up shoulder limited him to just 5 games, and the injury was serious, potentially career-ending.
The young man was told he was not going to play anymore because he can't tackle.
But he could still catch.
We get a couple other opinions from some NFL doctors, and he comes back, and we decided that maybe the best move for him and this football team was to play him on offense.
Hull made the switch to wide receiver, a position he knows quite well, not only because he defended against them, but because he was recruited as one.
Brought him back here in the spring. He was polished. He looked like he'd been playing it for 4 years.
Since he had got here, that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to play receiver, and but now that he has gotten that opportunity, has been able to stay healthy and make a bunch of plays for us. It's awesome to see.
He really enjoys playing. He knows this is his last shot.
A last shot he's made the most out of. 13 catches, 280 yards, 22 yards per catch, a touchdown against his hometown school, and most importantly, a healthy shoulder.
How's his shoulder feeling?
Oh yeah, it feels a lot better. I did a lot of work in the offseason to make sure that was, that problem was alleviated, and feel like we've done the necessary measures to make sure that doesn't happen again.
Boy, he's been playing pretty good. I think he's really done a great job of making plays like players do. I always tell him players make plays, and he has made some plays for us this year.
Hey guys, I got to say, when I got here last year, I knew Steve Hull as a defensive back, and I remember him an interception at Camp Randall in Wisconsin last year, and it took me a little while. I didn't know at first that he was a receiver starting in.
Yeah, no, he came here originally recruited by Ron Zook to play wide receiver, Cincinnati native, but he's made the transition almost seamless this year, and he had a big game against Wisconsin this year, but on the offensive side of the ball.
Right.
Nathan Sheilhouse hit him on a couple deep passes. They have a good rapport off the field. Hull was in a groomsman in Sheilhouse's wedding this summer, and the two connected multiple times against the Badgers, and he had 105 receiving yards, most of his career in this season, and he comes into today's game 8th in the nation in yards per reception, averaging almost 22 yards a catch.
But what have you seen from him?
He had a nice game against Cincinnati as well early in the season. His hometown school, as Matt mentioned, he is from Cincinnati Sycamore High School. When he was on defense, you hated to see him make a tackle almost, because you know how bad his shoulder is. And that's the reason he got switched. He just couldn't tackle anybody anymore. And even now, when he gets hit, you kind of cringe a little bit, because if you've ever had shoulder injuries or shoulder problems, football's a tough game to play if you're hurting in that way.
Well, and he's been the deep threat. I can only think of really one moment. It was in the Washington game at Soldier Field when he kind of missed what could have been a touchdown.
Dropped the sure touchdown early against the Huskies, and interesting too. Of the 6 games Illinois had this year, 2 have come away from Memorial Stadium. Steve Hull has not caught a pass either up at Soldier Field or in Lincoln at Memorial Stadium, Nebraska's home field. So he's found a success in Champaign. We'll see if that can carry over today against Michigan State.
See him as a deep threat, because 51, 55, 30, and 23, those are some of the yardage numbers on his catches.
Rattling off the numbers again.
And we do have to say, though, may have been a little banged up for the last.
Possibly. He had a purple jersey on earlier this week at practice. He got hit in the head against Wisconsin, so we'll kind of see his status for today's game.
We'll hope he's okay for that, because he certainly is becoming an impact player on the receiving corps. Well, near the halfway point of the NFL season after this week, a lot of teams will have played 8 games. Elise Smedeker joins us now for Illini and the Pros, brought to you by O'Brien Auto Park of Urbana.
Thanks, Matt. It was week lucky number 7 in the NFL, and no pun intended, it was a good week for the Colts with an impressive win over Peyton Manning and the Broncos, and that's where we'll start.
Cornerback Vontae Davis and the Colts. Davis tallying 3 tackles and 2 pass deflections, an effort good enough for Sports Illustrated Defensive Player of the Week, and good enough to hand the Broncos their first loss of the season. Manning after Sunday's game.
That's never easy, playing against on the road. In a loud stadium against a good pass rush.
Also for the Colts, Hugh Thornton, part of an offensive line that allowed just 2 sacks and helped put up 334 yards.
All the way
to the end zone.
The Colts leading the AFC South. They're 5-2 going into a bye week.
Intercepted.
Another team that had a big win, the New York Jets, who faced off against Tom Brady and the New England Patriots. Tight end Jeff Cumberland with 3 catches, good for 41 yards. This one here, a 25-yard grab.
Jeff Cumberland.
San Diego Chargers defensive end Corey Leggett got his second sack of the season as the Chargers beat Jacksonville 24-6. And running back Rashard Mendenhall of the Arizona Cardinals with 13 carries for 22 yards in Thursday night's matchup against the Seattle Seahawks. Mendenhall with a 3-yard touchdown here at the end of the second quarter.
You didn't think I'd end Illini in the pros without talking about the last 7-0 team, the Kansas City Chiefs, did you? Offensive tackle Jeff Allen and offensive guard John Asamoah helped Kansas City to another 100-plus yard rushing game. Also in this game, Texas defensive end Whitney Merciless, who had 2 tackles. Until next week, I'm Elise Menaker for Inside the Illini.
Welcome back to Inside the Illini Big Ten football here at Hickory River Smokehouse in Urbana. Now, if it were the BCS, just go ahead and pencil Eastern Illinois in for the national championship.
I'm fine with that.
Thank goodness it's not the BCS. They actually play to get to the championship game. But Eastern up to number 2 in the national polls this week. We go inside the Panthers with Eastern Illinois University.
A record homecoming crowd of over 11,500 Panther fans filled the O'Brien Field stands as the number 3 ranked Eastern Illinois Panthers took on OVC rival Southeast Missouri State. And what is becoming a broken record, the top offense in the FCS lit up the scoreboard once again. Quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo broke more OVC and EIU records as the Panthers jumped out to a quick 14-0 lead.
Garoppolo back, a lot of time, going it deep, got Drake out there, got it, 40, 30.
Jimmy football and a balanced attack through the air and ground amassed over 650 yards of total offense, as EIU rolled up 55 points on SEMO to win 55-33. EIU head coach Dino Babers knows that a win is a win and that the Panthers were not overlooking the Redhawks.
This is a trap game, and I thought the team handled it well. Very easily, you could have been Murray State and came out of this thing with a loss, but they were sharp enough, and the coaches did a good enough job to get past this opponent and get them to the big game that we got coming up this week down again.
EIU sophomore defensive tackle Dino Fonte led the Panthers defensively against SEMO with 8 tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss. Fonte says that having a prolific offense is nothing they take for granted.
Huge advantage that we have. It's great knowing that when you get a 3 and out, you can always count on the offense to come back and put points on the board. And when we start running the ball and have 2 100-yard rushers, that keeps us off the field and the offense on the field, and their defense getting more tired and we're resting. So it's a great feeling when you know that your offense has got your back and they can put points on the board like that.
The Panthers' win and a loss by number 2 ranked Sam Houston State last Saturday has EIU as the number 2 team in the FCS. This week, the Panthers will battle number 21 Tennessee State in a battle of undefeated OVC teams, and it's a battle of the number 1 offense and number 1 defense.
You know what the key to the game is, to me? If you've got the number 1 defense, okay, which is Tennessee State, versus the number 1 offense, which is Eastern Illinois University, then the key to the game is Eastern Illinois University's defense versus Tennessee State's offense. If our defense beats their offense, we'll win the game. And if their offense beats our defense, they'll win the game.
The Panthers and Tigers will square off today at 4 p.m. from Nashville, Tennessee. The game can be seen online at the OVC Digital Network. Reporting on the Eastern Illinois Panthers for Inside the Illini, I'm Brad Kupiak of WEIU.
And thanks as always to EIU for that report, that game against Tennessee State at 4 o'clock Central Time. Next up, our pick, and we'll take a look at some of the big matchups across college football next on Inside the Illini Big Ten Football. Welcome back to Inside the Illini Big Ten Football. Time for our pick'ems, brought to you by Hickory River Smokehouse, which is where we are sitting right now. And guys, take a look at the standings first. The News-Gazette has been in the lead all year. 2-1 last week, 12-6 record. I'm at 11-7 with my pick. Steve dropping to an even 9-9, 500. That'll get you in the Hall of Fame.
I've got you guys right where I want you.
I just have to make up for Lauren, so.
Yeah, Lauren, well, we all incorrectly picked the Florida-Missouri game. That just tells you, maybe we were wrong about Missouri. we'll get a chance to redeem ourselves, maybe.
See, at least in my case, I make the wrong picks by myself.
There you go.
Nobody else to blame.
The first game, we haven't done many Big 12 games, so let's do Texas TCU, Mac Brown's Texas Longhorns. Is he a lame duck coach?
I don't think so. I think he saved his job beating Oklahoma a few
That
weeks
was a big
ago,
one.
and those are two teams that, a few years ago you'd mentioned in the BCS race late in the year, and not so much anymore, but I like the Longhorns in this one.
I do too. I'll go with Texas.
TCU at home, I'll go with Texas.
Because that makes perfect sense.
Yeah. Northwestern at Iowa. I like this game because we don't know what Northwestern is, and we don't really know what Iowa is.
Good choice.
Yes.
I'm going to go with the Hawkeyes. I think their defense will be able to kind of stifle Pat Fitzgerald's Wildcats today.
You tell me first.
I just don't think we can be wrong about Northwestern 4 weeks in a row. Not that we all thought that they would beat Ohio State. I think Northwestern has to rebound at some point. I think this is the game they do it. Northwestern.
And I'll go with Matt on that and go with Iowa.
Yes.
Had you said Iowa, I was going the other way because I'm in last place. I got nothing to lose.
That's a very scientific process
That's right.
we do
Exactly.
every week.
Or else you get farther behind. Last game, South Carolina at Missouri. Missouri, I was wrong about them last week. Are we going to be wrong about them this week?
I think it pains me to pick Missouri. I'm not a big fan of the Tigers, never have been, but doesn't matter who they seem to have in a quarterback. Their offense is rolling, and I like the Tigers at home.
Last week I said if Missouri beats Florida, I might get on board. I wasn't on board before. They did that, so I guess I'm got 1 foot on board anyway. I'll go with Missouri.
Yeah, that whole SEC is a little hard to figure, at least on that side of the conference. But I would have to go with Missouri as well, about beating South Carolina. So there are our picks. They're not all the same. There will be a little bit of difference next week in the standings. And now here's the part where we go to Facebook, answer your questions about Illini football. The winner gets a $25 gift card to Hickory River Smokehouse. Jim Elder asked us this question, and it's similar. We answered a defensive question last week. This one a little more specific. What are we going to do to shore up the defensive front line? Right now we can't stop anything or get a serious push at the QB. Can't stop a nosebleed. I added that last part. What do they have to do? I mean, they're so young.
Get better players. They have to go out and get recruits in the offseason right now. Just the talent they have, mainly the defensive tackles, just isn't cutting it, like Tim Beckman's mentioned before, and Tim Banks as well, excuse me. Austin Teitzman, Jake Howe are trying hard. They're giving their best effort they can. They're not up to the talent level that they're facing week in and week out in the Big Ten.
Tim Banks talked about that this week. He's got a lot of friends in similar positions at all levels of football, and that's everybody's trying to do the same thing. Get those big, fast defensive linemen. Once you start the pipeline and get that tradition going, then you're set. But as far as what do they do this year, I'm not sure there is an answer.
Well, I think that's the answer to Jim's question. It's probably not this year is the answer to Jim's question there. And it's just tough for them because you're right. They need to get better players. This isn't NFL football where they all kind of come from the same crop of NFL talent. They all go to the combine. They all have these amazing numbers. I think Illinois is just a little too far behind at this point.
And you can't make mid-season trades.
Right, exactly. Don't you wish you could?
I bet Tim Beckman, he talks about that almost every week. We have who we have. So read in between the lines if you want to with that.
He's good friends with Urban Meyer. You think he can make a phone call?
Yeah, they gotta have a couple of backups that would work, don't they?
That's right. I don't think he'd like that for their matchup November 16th. But we'll see. Well, thank you, Jim, for that question. Be sure to ask us a question. Log on to Facebook. Like our Inside the Illini page, post something on our wall there, and we'll see if we can answer a question for you. We love your feedback. Well, next up, Michigan State is in town, a team that's just been so dominant on defense and kind of a mystery on offense. We'll talk about how the matchup might play out coming up and Inside the Illini, Big Ten football. Welcome back to Inside the Illini, Big Ten football here at Hickory River Smokehouse. Our final segment of the show, it's homecoming on the Illinois campus. Michigan State comes in with a below-average offense and an absolutely elite defense, a combination so far that has them at 6-1 and in charge of their own destiny in terms of the Legends Division crown. Let's take a look at their matchup with Illinois.
Because they don't have a marquee win, Michigan State, you could argue, is the best unranked team in the country. They bring a defense that ranks first nationally, total yards allowed, and it's not even close.
They've got some good players. Their corners are very good coverage guys, older guys. Their linebacker core has been very successful.
While the defense is a strength for the Spartans, offense is Illinois' strength. Not to the degree that they dominate in East Lansing, but they did hang 32 points on the 5th-ranked defense in Wisconsin.
Coach Kubik, being in Western Michigan, obviously has got their offense going.
I want the expectations higher. I mean, I think, when I talked to him last night, I said, I think sometimes, like, if we believe that we can score, as coaches, and I really believe that they think so. It's just we got to put it in overdrive a little bit more.
The defensive dominance has overcome some offensive inconsistency for the Spartans. It looks like they've settled, though, on quarterback Connor Cook, and running back Jeremy Langford takes the majority of the carries in the run game.
Typical Big Ten offense, very similar to what we've seen, thus far. When they've been a little bit inconsistent. When they scored in bunch, when they've scored a ton, and obviously when they haven't, they haven't.
Knowing where you're supposed to be is probably one of the biggest things successful defenses do. And that's something we gotta get better at.
It's another one of those games that will be won or lost in the trenches, which hasn't worked out so well for Illinois here in the first 2 games of the Big Ten season.
We mentioned it plenty earlier in the show, but we got to talk about it again, how good this Michigan State defense. I don't think that's a horse you can beat to dead. That's a real good unit they have.
Yeah, the key matchup for me today is just to see how Illinois offensive coordinator Bill Kubik kind of matches with Michigan State's defensive coordinator Pat Narduzzi. It's almost going to be kind of a chess match and kind of see what Kubik throws out there and what Narduzzi throws back at him. We've all seen Bill Kubik likes to open up the playbook at pretty much all times this season, and Narduzzi's got a defense that's as tough as anyone in the country. So the battle between kind of 2 coaching veterans in that is one thing I'm looking forward to from today's game.
Yeah, they're only giving up 13 points, just under 14 points a game, and their defense, we've talked about that, number 1 in the country. I was surprised when I looked at the stats a little bit. I knew they were really good against the run, but then again, if you have the number 1 overall defense, you got to be doing something on the passing side as well. They're pretty good there too.
Yeah, they got some physical cornerbacks. They'll most likely show man coverage against Illinois, like Illinois seen at times this year with Washington, Nebraska. Wisconsin played more of a zone look against them, but I'd imagine Michigan State will go man-to-man in their coverage, and they got a great cornerback in Darqueze Denard, who had 2 interceptions a few weeks ago and is capable of making some big plays.
I think they're a defensive unit that's really good at making adjustments as well. When I was reading about the game against Purdue, gave up 39 yards on the opening drive rushing against Purdue, then 27 the entire rest of the game in terms of rushing.
I think, Bill Kubik and Tim Beckman have talked about this till they're almost blue in the face, but getting out to a quick start is huge this week against Michigan State. I mean, Indiana was able to kind of get up on them a few weeks ago. Tevin Coleman sprang loose for a big touchdown run early. So if Illinois can score, on their first possession, if they get the ball like they like to do early in the game, that might bode well for Illinois.
Michigan State doesn't just stop you with their defense, they score with their defense. And they've had 5 defensive scores on the season so far, so they can put the ball in the end zone and really had to in that Purdue game.
Oh, I think, and to your point about getting off to a fast start, the Illini need to do that for more reasons than just being in the game early. If we want to open up that playbook, then Cubit's going to need a lead or at least a close game to be able to do that. They can't afford being down 21-0 and having to limit your options when it comes to what you want to run.
Oh yeah, no, I know Bill Cubit didn't really see the run game getting going against Wisconsin. He knew that'd be difficult with the front line Wisconsin had. Tim Beckman said earlier this week that Michigan State's defensive line is huge, and their linebacking core is just solid, and their cornerbacks and their secondary is just physical. So if they can get out to a quick start, that'll help kind of Illinois have a balance in the run and pass game. Obviously, they like to pass the ball a bit more, but when you become one-dimensional against a team like Michigan State, it's pretty easy to know what play might be coming.
Something has to give. You got the number 2 passing offense in the Big Ten, and Illinois against the number 1 passing defense. Something's got to give. We talked about Donovan Young a little bit earlier. He's got to hang on to the football too.
Right.
And I think that's probably why he's getting fewer and fewer carries.
Oh yeah, Bill Cubit mentioned it this week as well as Tim Beckman. You've got to hang on to the football. He's had 2 straight fumbles in the first 2 games, and Donovan's always a confident player, and his confidence has been a little shaken so far with the slow start he's had to this season.
I think on the other side, the other matchup there is Illinois' defense versus Michigan State's offense. The defense hasn't been great, but Michigan State's offense hasn't really struck fear in anybody.
Yeah, Jonathan Brown said, he thinks the Michigan State offense, everyone talks about how bad they are, but he thinks they're kind of overlooked in that aspect. Connor Cook's really kind of stabilized the quarterback position recently, and Jeremy Langford's come on the last two games. He's rushed for more than 100 yards in each of those 2 games. So he's kind of been that replacement that Michigan State's been looking for since Le'Veon Bell went to the Steelers.
They got some big physical wide receivers too that may step up today.
And their tight ends are huge. They're starting
Other
tight
than
ends.
that.
Other than that, you know.
No sweat. No, very good football team, and I think one of the keys, and we beat it to death every week, is the turnovers. Michigan State is one of the top 3 in the league. Michigan State, Ohio State, Nebraska, top 3 in the league in turnover margin, and they're 8-0 in the league. Illinois is tied for 10th, and they're 0-2. So that tells you what you need to know. They need to protect the football, like you said about Donovan Mitchell. Hey, that does it for us here on Inside the Illini Big Ten Football here at Hickory River Smokehouse. Join us again next week as we prepare for Penn State. Don't get too far ahead of yourselves. A 2:30 kickoff today against Michigan State. Have a great evening, and go Illini.
Thank you for watching Inside the Illini Big Ten College Football, brought to you by your local Anheuser-Busch distributors, O'Brien Auto Park of Urbana, Hickory River Smokehouse in Urbana, and WAND.